Physical Gold Fund presents the Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards. Insights and analysis about economics, geopolitics, global finance, and gold. Welcome to part 2 of the latest podcast from the Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards, presented by Physical Gold Fund. Let me pick out a single tiny thread from the Middle East story, one that leads to China. Some rather unlikely bedfellows have rushed to join a new Chinese institution, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. They include Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and most recently Israel. Of course, the bulk of the member countries, or at least the founding countries, were Asian, but among some other 40 or 50 nations participating, we're seeing Britain, France, Germany, and Norway. I guess it would be nice to think all these countries suddenly care about Asia's need for roads and railways, but perhaps there's something else going on here.
Well, great question, John. As usual, this is something that can be thought about or analyzed at multiple levels, but why don't we jump in and do exactly that. So we're talking about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB. It's a real institution. I mean, it's new. It's just in its foundational stages, but China formed it. They put out subscriptions, offered subscriptions. You could, as a country, you could sign up, put in your share of the capital, become a founding member of the bank, get a seat on the board. Really not different than starting a company or sending out an offering document in a fund, and you sign up, you send in your money, and you own a piece of it. Now, this is a stick in the eye of one of the key Bretton Woods institutions, two of them actually, the World Bank and the Asia Development Bank, which has been around for a very long time. The Bretton Woods architecture, just a quick reminder, you had three institutions. You had the IMF, which International Monetary Fund, which you can think of as a world central bank. You had the World Bank, which is not a world bank, it's really a development bank for poorer countries and infrastructure projects. And then you had the, what was the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, now the World Trade Organization, designed to encourage free trade. So you had a central bank, a development lender, and a free trade organization, and that was the basic architecture of Bretton Woods, completely dominated by the United States. With participation from Western Europe and Japan. When all this was set up, Russia and China were communist and were not in the game. Over time, that all changed, and Russia and China both joined the IMF. China recently joined the world, not too long ago, joined the World Trade Organization. So they were sort of, joining the club and playing along with the great game, the big international global monetary system game. But a couple things happened. China grew so fast that it was probably deservedly entitled to a larger voice at the IMF. Voice is just their jargon for votes, more votes at the IMF, in other words. And it was clear that some of the old members, Belgium and others, had too many votes relative to the size of their economy. China didn't have enough. So there was some reform effort underway to China more votes. But the U.S. stood in the way of that because the U.S. had its own agenda. And we wanted China to restructure their economy away from exports and investment towards consumption. We wanted to sell them some stuff, and we wanted them to stop fighting the currency wars, to stop cheapening the yuan. We wanted them to kind of anchor their currency to the dollar. So the U.S. had stuff that we wanted from China. China had stuff they wanted from us, namely more votes in the IMF. So it was sort of a stare fest, the two sides staring each other down and kind of mobilizing weapons. So if I'm going to play a poker game with you, John, I want a lot of chips, and you want a lot of chips, so we all want a lot of chips at the table. So everyone started piling up chips. One of China's chips is certainly the BRICS Development Bank and their coziness with the BRICS, but also more importantly, I think, this Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. So what China's saying is, let us in your club. We're already in the club. Give us more votes to the club. Give us more power at the club. Put us on the membership committee or however you want to describe it. Or we'll set up our own club. We'll go our own way. So that's what's going on here. As far as the eagerness of Western Europe, Norway, and a lot of others, as well as Asia, to join this bank, by the way, over U.S. objections, the U.S. did not join. The U.S. voiced objections. The U.S. was visibly disappointed when the U.K. signed up. Our good old friends in the UK. So why did they all do it anyway? Why did they all sign up despite U.S. objections? Well, the answer is they want the deals. I mean, if you're going to start doing multi-billion-dollar, multi-year infrastructure projects in Central and South Asia. I mean, what are they? Well, it's railroads, it's bridges, it's highways, it's airports, it's telecommunications hubs, it's oil and natural gas pipelines. And these are big ticket items, and don't think that the Germans and the French and the UK don't want to be first in line for all of those contracts. So in China, behind the scenes is saying, well, if you want those contracts, you want us to lend money to your project so you can get these contracts, then you have to sign up and put some capital in and improve our creditworthiness, et cetera. So that's what's going on there. Meanwhile, the wallflower are left without anyone to dance with at the 7th grade dance is Japan, because Japan is the head of the Asian Development Bank, which was designed to do exactly what the AIIB is going to do, except that that's part of the Bretton Woods infrastructure that China is turning its back on, at least in the short run. So let's see how this plays out. So Christine Lagarde was in Beijing a couple of weeks ago. We have the IMF spring meeting next week. There will be a lot of significant announcements there, probably relating to the commencement of a process to include the Chinese yuan in the special drawing right. By the way, it'd be very interesting to see, they haven't announced it yet, but very interesting to see how the AIIB keeps its books. Because, it's a bank, you're going to have books, you're going to have assets and liabilities and loans and profit and loss statement just like any bank, and you have to pick a currency. Well, it wouldn't really make sense to do dollars if you're trying to break away from U.S. dollar hegemony and U.S. dominance of Bretton Woods. Why would you do it in dollars? It's probably not going to be in yuan because that makes it China-centric, and even though China is the dominant voice, they're trying to make this multilateral. Could be euros, but why would you have euros for an Asian bank? So I don't know, but it seems likely that they'll keep their books in special drawing rights, in SDRs. By the way, the IMF already does that, so have a look at IMF financial statements. They're available online. They're all in SDRs. When the IMF makes a loan, they've made loans to Ukraine recently. Those were in SDRs. I talk about SDRs a lot, and people laugh at me. They're like, "Oh, what are you talking about? It's just another fiat currency, and it'll never work." And my answer is, it's been working since 1969. There's nothing new. The SDRs work fine. It's just that no one really understands them. So be interesting to see if they do keep their books in SDRs, which they may very well, and that's another, so if you keep your books in SDRs and the IMF includes the yuan in the SDR, which they may do starting as early as next week. I mean, it won't be official until January 1st, 2016, but that process may start next week and sort of, get formally voted at the IMF annual meeting in Washington in early October. So I think that one might be in Lima, Peru. Yeah, I think the annual meeting might be in Peru. But be that as it may, this train has left the station. The SDR train has left the station a long time ago. So it's a very important development. The U.S. is out in the cold. But what remains to be seen is whether the U.S. will nevertheless make peace with China by inviting China to have a bigger voice at the IMF, and maybe at some point the AIIB gets merged with the Asian Development Bank, and we're all one big happy family with China having a few more votes. And I think that really is the bigger play here. China doesn't want to start their own club. They want to be in the big boys club, so to speak. It's just a question of having forcing strategies to get there. So, by the way, one quick footnote on infrastructure, just going back to the first topic, John, about Iran. Part of this U.S.-Iranian détente, of course, is the lifting of sanctions. And a lot of people are looking at that and saying, wow, that's a big opportunity. A lot of infrastructure needed in Iran, a lot of imports needed in Iran if you take away sanctions, and that's certainly true. And I don't doubt that American business people will be on the first plane to Tehran once the president eases up some more on the sanctions. But what the Americans are going to discover is the Germans are already there. They never left. So the big winner, when you relieve sanctions on Iran, the big winner is not going to be the United States, it's going to be Germany. So if you're looking for ways to play that, I think about German large caps, Siemens, SAP, Volkswagen, Daimler-Benz, and others. They're going to be the big winners on Iranian infrastructure projects. And of course, this all converges if Germany's in the AIIB and the AIIB decides to finance projects in Iran, and Iran gives the contracts to Germany. Everybody wins except the United States. So, watch that space, but it is a very interesting, fast-moving world.
Well, thank you, Jim. We've covered a huge amount of ground with just 2 questions. Yes, I wanted to ask you about life here in the United States and the Fed, but I think we have questions from our listeners. Perhaps that'll come up, and I really want to hear those questions. So I'm going to turn this over to Alex Stanzik now to give us those questions from the listeners.
Thank you very much, John. And I also want to quickly say thank you to all of our listeners who've been sending in questions.
You have been listening to The Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards, presented by Physical Gold Fund. Recordings can be found at physicalgoldfund.com/podcasts. You can register there for news of upcoming interviews with Jim Rickards and other world-class thinkers.